Welcome back to another episode of the Playbook Podcast. The Playbook Podcast. It's so funny how things transpire, and the reasons as to why things started and how they evolve and how they change. Like the podcast used to be the main thing, and then the Run Club, the side thing within this, and I didn't understand how two of them correlated, and I didn't understand how that mixed within the working environment that I am in, and that used to be like murky for me, and things, something that I was unsure about and uncertain about, and there wasn't a clear correlation between them all. I think there's so much of a correlation with them now, and it's just about reminding myself to continue recording podcasts, because the only thing that doesn't really make sense within it is the podcast itself. But again, every time I think of not recording a podcast and discontinuing the podcast, I have Liam in the back of my mind being like, Brian, remember why you set this up. It was to document your journey. It was for the sake of doing it. It's not to be the biggest podcast out there. It's not to have the biggest audience. It's for yourself, and it's for other people that might be able to learn lessons from that. So that's why I need to remind myself when it comes to the podcast, when it comes to recording episodes. The reasons that I say this is because it's been about 4 weeks, maybe even longer, since I recorded the last podcast. Last podcast, I was pre-Ironman in Durban, which was like 2-3 weeks ago now. So a lot has happened, a lot has changed. Change of environment. I mentioned in the previous one that I was moving to Maidan, and that's exactly where I am at the moment. Let me just double check we're connected. And yeah, that's where I am now. District 1, a lot more quiet, no more construction noise that was the pain of my life about a year ago today. And nicer place, nicer community, nicer area, right beside the cycle track. Just if I look out my window right now, I can see the cycle and running track, which is like the main reason. It's funny because if you're looking out my window, to the left is the lagoon and to the right is the cycle track and running track. A lot of people would be focusing on the left, but I'm focusing on the right. Is that an analogy for my life? Maybe. Whilst everybody is focusing on one thing, I'm focusing on the other. I think that's interesting as well. It's a conversation that I had with somebody yesterday in the Run Club. It's like, okay, whatever everybody else is doing, don't do that, and as a result you'll be unique, and it's what will make you different and what make you or your product special. It's like every other Run Club in the city is asking for something. They're asking for something in return. They're selling something, a product, some shoes, some memberships, to filter a funnel into whatever it is that the product is, and the community is set up around the product, not the product set up around the community, and given without any expectation of receiving. And it's okay if it's not a business. It's okay if it doesn't make you money. It's okay if all it has been doing for the last year and a half has been costing you money. That's okay, because in the long term, it might pay off. It could pay off because of the whole, law of reciprocation. And that's difficult for some people to understand. But the mere fact that I'm doing this for a different reason, and that it's set up specifically to be different from other run clubs in the city, is what makes it unique. Nowhere else in the city, I don't believe that you'll get the same vibes that you get from the Run Club. And that's what people say time and time again. It's like the people are what make it, and how it makes them feel. The atmosphere and the vibe is like not like any other Run Club that they go to. And that's what makes us unique. That's what it's been since day one. And people who worked in companies that work with a load of Run Clubs, that's what they said. That's what they said that makes us unique, and that's the atmosphere that they get off, and the vibes that they get from the Run Club. Whereas some of the Run Clubs might be, if Dubai done a Run Club, and they make the Run Clubs Dubai-esque. You understand it if you understand it, and it's hard to describe if it's not, but it's like status, materialism, sell, and transactional. And that's what we refuse to be, and it's a refuse to what we will ever accept. And we're just all about the people and genuine connection, genuine, authentic connection. That's what life's moments are made up of. You don't remember, the material. You don't remember the feelings when you bought X, Y, and Z. It's the experiences and then the people. At the end of your life, you're not going to talk about all of the things you bought. You're going to talk about the things that you did with the people who you loved, and That's what we're about. Without getting a bit wishy-washy. Yeah, so I mean, talk about an action packed for a few weeks in terms of the Ironman, in terms of Ironman 70.3. I need to always caveat that because it's not a full Ironman. Ironman 70.3, moving apartment. I think those were the main two things of friction and everything that had gone into it. In terms of lessons that I've learned, I think a lot of self-reflection has happened as a byproduct of doing it. It's not like I've spent, time and energy self-reflecting in some sort of meditation about my last few weeks or about the whole half Ironman or my past few months. It's just something that has naturally arisen. A lot of people might suffer with this, but I know I definitely do, in terms of not suffer, but like just in terms of an overactive mind and a tendency to reflect and a tendency to think about things that have occurred and why they've occurred, and digging deeper and pulling that thread of natural curiosity the whole time. And that's what drives me. That's what drives my decisions in the moment and in the season of my life now, is natural curiosity. In terms of the big kind of lessons that I've learned over the past few weeks post Ironman, I think I've had a lot of mental clarity and I've had a lot of mental energy, and I didn't realize how locked in I was and how focused I was and how, completely obsessed with one specific goal that I was, and leaving a lot of things to the wayside. And I think that's important in order to be able to achieve, but I didn't really realize how much of a mental energy toll that took on me. When the feeling of fatigue and the feeling of tiredness is something that you feel on a daily basis, after a certain period of time that just becomes habituated in a sense where it just starts being the new norm. And that's what life feels like. And that's fine when you're in it, and it's fine in the overall overarching aspect. But when you're out of it, you can reflect upon it in hindsight and point to it as a period of your life in which that you aren't feeling how you're currently feeling. And I think that's what I'm feeling last week. And this week, my first 2 weeks back in work, has been a significant increase in terms of my mental energy, a significant increase in terms of the energy levels that I have physically, mentally, emotionally, and then also the loosening of the grip over my life, the loosening over the grip over a structure, the loosening of a grip over, needing 8 hours of sleep, or there will be a cataclysmic chain of events in which that I don't get my 8 hours sleep, and as a result I can't perform to my best, and my God, it's the worst thing that's happened ever. So it's been all of that within the last 2 weeks. Having said that, it's like an overflow of things that have been queuing up outside the door in terms of ideas, business ideas, things within the run club, ideas within work. Is just like the second that the half Ironman finished, the door opened and they just all started swarming in at the same time, which is fine. But I think taken to the extreme, it's going to end up with me, constantly fixated on something else now, which is not a negative. It just is. There are no negative and positive. It just is. In terms of the actual half Ironman itself, so I mean, let's go back to that. So obviously it was in Durban. I went there, solo travel, solo mission, and got a lay of the land on the Friday I landed in, and it was going to be on the Sunday. I set myself a goal of sub 6 hours, and when you take on something new, when you reach into the unknown and you take on something that you've never done before, there's the massive element of fear, but also not knowing what your abilities could be because you've no point of reference. Like I couldn't mimic race day fatigue. I couldn't mimic, a simulation of an Ironman 70.3, just as you wouldn't be able to simulate like a marathon. I didn't know what I was capable of. yeah, I could point to different Olympic distance triathlons and use that as a point of reference. But again, you're over doubling the distance. So within that, it's just curious to see if your body could last that long. So as a result, I definitely played it safe in terms of my overall estimation, because I didn't want to be setting super unrealistic or ambitious goals and as a result falling short of an arbitrary number. So I played it safe, definitely. And a lot of people aim for sub 6 their first half Ironman, so that's what I done, and wanted to see what I was capable of. Now, the night before, when I was saying what my goals were in terms of being sub 6, in the back of my mind, I was like, I could definitely push this to like 5:50, 5:45. I could equate that the swim would take me roughly 20 minutes, that the bike, I'm going to aim for 3 hours, and that if I got in the half marathon at the end, less than 2 hours, then I'd be happy. I knew that I knew that the swim and the bike were realistic time expectations. I knew that the run was not realistic, in a sense that I was not being ambitious enough, and that if I felt it in my legs coming off the bike and going into the run, that I could really show up and aim for, a 150 or so. But I also had to take into account that in my first Berge de Berge, which was literally a year and a few months ago, the time in which that I did for my first half marathon was like 5:02 or 5:03 per kilometer, which averaged out at like 1:46 or 1:47 or whatever it is, 1:48. So I always had that in mind going into it, in terms of, okay, I've set myself, a realistic goal. But again, it was those feelings of reaching into the unknown. Now, reaching into the unknown, the first time I reached into it, and I feel like I took on something that I never, a performance related endeavor of struggle to see if you could complete it. The very first time, the overwhelming sensation of impending doom was upon me. My first 10K, my first half marathon, I was terrified. And my first marathon, I was terrified as well. I think going into this, there was the element of fear and the element of impending doom. But the big difference this time was being present with it. And this was something that I experienced just from my first triathlon and my second triathlon, the Olympic distance, was, yes, I'm feeling this fear. Yes, I'm feeling this impending doom. Yes, I've got all of these doubts and these uncertainties and, this feeling accumulating in my body. But it's like being grateful for that feeling, because not many times in my life will I feel this. Maybe 20, 30, 40 times, depending on how long I decide to do these things, will I feel these feelings, and they will never be intense again, as intense as it is right now. Because after I do a half Ironman, I will know that at least I've done one, and that I can do it, that I can finish it. But I'd never done a half Ironman, and I didn't know if I could complete it. Logic would assume that I would have been able to complete it based off my training, but still, just never having gone there, never having gone that deep, stirred up those elements of uncertainty. And this time it was sitting in that anxiety, sitting in that overwhelm, sitting in that fear, breathing it in and being grateful for that, being massively grateful, because not many people feel those in their life. Plenty of people stay within their comfort zone, and that's up to the individual if they decide to do that. And the past version of myself would have stayed within his comfort zone, and a past version of myself, would have always erred on the side of caution and never took on major optional suffering. And I think that's really powerful. I think anything that can stir up significant emotions within you is a powerful feeling. And that's why within death and loss and, elation and joy and, fear and anxiety, it's like the mere fact that it can stir up such a biological, physical manifestation of feelings in my body, that just the mere fact that it can do that is so powerful. It's like, this is not something that should be just swept under the carpet. This is not something that should be ignored. So I sat in that feeling of stress and overwhelm, the day before, sorting out all of the admin that goes with it, setting up my transitions, making sure that everything was in place, that, that I knew my nutrition strategy, that I knew my pacing strategy, that, I was following all the guidelines and I was checking in on this time and that time, and that my bags were going to be secure, and, my phone and the transition zones and transport and all of this, was taken care of, and all of this was sorted the day before. But during it, there was definitely a lot of those feelings. And the night before, mapping out kind of the reasons as to why I did that, and taking time, why I took on that pursuit, and taking time with myself, and enjoying that solitude, so to speak. And then on the day, I fucking smashed it. I was extremely, extremely happy with myself. I really played it safe on the bike, and there was a lot of hills, which I wasn't used to. Obviously, training in Dubai, there's not a lot of mountains and hills. Yeah, there is North UAE, but I just never had really done that. I'd literally probably taken on 100 meters of elevation in all of my cycling training. Now, I did work in some resistance stuff, but still, that's not going to mimic, climbing a fucking hill in South Africa. So there was that element as well. It was unbelievably well structured and well mapped out in terms of the actual race itself. Played it safe on the bike. I gave it a good bit of effort on the swim, but just didn't smoke my legs. So I didn't really use a lot of leg propulsion, just mainly arms when it comes to swimming. And then the bike, I played it quite safe. I held it around the 30, 31 kilometers per hour mark. I wasn't following wattage because it's not something that I don't have a bike computer. So I kept it fairly safe. At the end of the 90k cycle, I definitely felt tired. I definitely felt fatigued, but I wasn't obliterated. And I didn't really know how okay I felt until I got off the bike. Those initial few steps were definitely stiff. I did the bike in 2:57, I believe. So literally just under the 3 hour mark, which I was happy with. The first few steps coming off the bike, I had that dizziness, had that feeling in my legs a small bit. I was a bit hungry, which was like a bit of a red flag for me. So I took on a nutrition bar, because I've never felt hungry during a big event like that. And then moved in, grabbed my runners, put in my AirPods, and then I set off to run. And my legs felt fucking fantastic. And I was storming out the gates, going at a pace at which I felt comfortable at, not like I was pushing, and that I felt like that I was comfortable with. And I looked down at my watch and it was like 4:45 for the first kilometer. And I was like, oh shit. I knew I could have been overcooking it a small bit, but I decided to ease it back to 450s. First 10 kilometers were at 450, I believe, and it felt okay. And I was like, holy shit, I actually could PB my half marathon. Now, I did enter a world of pain around the 13, 14, 15 kilometer mark, and it was absolutely a struggle, to say the least. And slowly the pace started slowing down, even though I was given the same or more effort. It really started picking up in terms of heat, because it was beginning to become, 11, 11:30, 12 o'clock there and abouts, mid 20 range, right under the sun. But it's something that I accounted for in terms of all of the training that I've done here in Dubai. So I think a lot more people were suffering compared to me. I was passing a lot of people who would have started around the same time as me in terms of self-seeded at the start of the swim. I was passing a lot of people on the run, and a lot of people tend to blow up. A lot of people tend to, overreach on the cycle and then absolutely blow up on the run. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. For me, I just kept going, and I maintained a solid pace between 4:55. There was a few kilometers in there at 5:05, 5:10. The second last and third last kilometer were definitely close to, if not on the 5:20 mark. But I finished that at 4:59 per kilometer, the half marathon right after the bike, and I was fucking delighted with it. So I ended up with an overall time of 5 hours and 31 minutes, which bet my expected time by 29 minutes. My goal time by 29 minutes, not my expected time, my goal time. And I came across the line fucking shattered, absolutely in bits. It was probably the most in pain. It's not in pain, but fatigued that I've been. Like, I was the most in pain after the marathon. The instant pain after the marathon was like nothing I've probably experienced. I'm not sure why. But with the half Ironman, it was the most fatigued I came across over the line. 5.5 hours of non-stop work definitely takes a toll on your body and definitely takes a toll on your mind. But I was absolutely delighted with myself. It was such a fucking experience, and an amazing place, and an amazing culture, amazing people, an amazing course, amazingly set up, and it was absolutely unbelievable. I think the main lessons that I took away from it during the actual event itself was the fuel that I was using. I don't mean the nutrition fuel. I mean the mental fuel, the emotional fuel, and the voice, and how I spoke to myself, and how hard I gripped. I reflected back on the last few months, let's say in 2025, and the fuel that I used. I think in the marathon and half marathon training last year, and I think more in the half marathon and 10K, my first few kind of two big events, I used a lot of negative fuel source, grip tightly, bite down hard, really kind of dive deep into the negative fuel and the fuck you energy, and the thing that will get you, it will get you enough. But the overwhelming feeling that I was getting during this half Ironman was enjoyment. There was a smile on my face. I was suffering, but I was enjoying it. I was enjoying, that feeling of digging deep. And even though I was suffering, it wasn't from a negative place. And there was no negative mindset. There was no negative voice in my head. It was just all positive. And that is kind of fairly, like, that is kind of what I experienced over the past few months when it came to the triathlon training. Was negative fuel had dissipated almost entirely, because it's something that is quite finite when it comes to as a resource. So I think you can only use it for a certain period of time. And it wasn't this whole Goggins-esque fucking motivation, because that is draining after a certain period of time. And whilst you definitely need to dig deep into that sometimes, I just didn't require it for 6 months, because it had just became my life, where I'd wake up at 5:30, I'd be in the pool, cycle or run or gym in the morning. And then after work, there'll be a second session. And, for your first week of training, you might use some of that source, but after a certain period of time, you cannot use it anymore. And as a result, what you're left with is kind of asking yourself, okay, what is my reason why? What is my fuel? What is my motivation? And you've used a lot of push motivation, but you start needing to look towards your pull motivation and the thing that is drawing you towards it. And that's what I had to find, and that's what I had to deal with, and that's what I had to lean more into. And that aspect of Brian is a more well-rounded, more authentic version of myself. And it's not fueled by negative, insecure motivations or drive. It's coming from a positive aspect. And throughout the whole thing and the event itself, it was that performance, it was that pressure, but performing well under pressure. And it's kind of similar to what I was talking about in terms of the red to blue mindset. I think that blue mindset of performance under pressure is like, yeah, you're under stress. Yeah, you're under pressure. Yeah, you're doing something difficult, but it doesn't mean that, you're mentally chastising yourself and, saying a load of fuck you energy to a load of people and yourself. It is the truest form of performance and high performance. And, a lot of my sessions became automatic and I felt very robotic over my last few weeks, where there was a complete dissociation between how I felt and my ability to train. How I felt had zero impact in terms of, no, I would say my want to train had absolutely zero impact on my capability or ability or my ability to do it. There was no correlation between, it was never a thought in the morning of, do I want to do this session or not? It just didn't enter my mind. It was just like, this is being done. You're doing it. And there was no even question. There was no even battle. There was no even, needing to convince myself to do it. It was just doing it. And maybe at the start there would have been that conversation internally being, about it. But after a while, it's just like, this is just life. And that's something that anybody can draw into their life. It doesn't take a special kind of person. And I think once you rep that muscle out multiple times over a long enough period of time, you are able to make that disassociation between your motivation in the here and now, your want to do it, your drive to do it, and you doing the work. And the funny thing about that is, once you rep that muscle out enough and you repeat that, it doesn't switch off. And it doesn't draw the lines between professional and personal. So any other time in your life that, that you're faced with doing difficult things, then there is no association. So, if there's something difficult to do in work, if there's something I'm procrastinating or whatever, there wasn't that, because my body has been so used to, and my mind has been so used to, being able to do things regardless of how I feel, being able to do things regardless of if I want to do them or not. So that ability to do hard things or your capacity to do hard things just grows and grows and grows, and the muscle gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's just that big disassociation between the two. Somebody reached out and was like, oh, well done in the half Ironman. And I was like, oh, thanks. And they're like, oh, well done for not, fair play for not, quitting, like during the race. And I was like, that's interesting. I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't know there was a third door. I didn't realize that me being able to drop out or quit was even an option. It wasn't even a thought that would have ever entered my mind. It's just not even a conceivable outcome. And it's not even like, oh, I'm not a quitter, but it just wasn't even there. It just didn't even exist as just an option. There was no other option. And that again can be taken into your own personal life. It's like, there are no plan Bs. What would happen if this was your only option? This was your only plan. This was like, there's no safety net. There's no optionality to do something different. This is it. And I've talked about that being beneficial within real estate. It's like, I didn't have a cushy little job to fall back on if real estate fell apart. I didn't have mummy or daddy's, savings or business to go into if it didn't work out. I didn't have, a graduate degree job to go into back in Ireland, or, I couldn't fall back on a psychology undergraduate. So there was no plan B. Plus, I had about a few €1,000 in my bank. So, there was no plan B. So when there is no plan B, you have to burn the boats, because there are no fucking boats. You just got there, and there's no way you're going to get off this place. So you have to do it. And there's no looking around and looking at different options, and trying to eliminate other options from your life when you're taking on something means that you're fully bought into it. I've talked about the story in which that kids were told to do a maths exam. 2 kids were told to do a maths exam, and one group of kids were told, once you complete it, you can get a treat. And the other kids were told, once you complete it, you get a treat, but there's also a vending machine down the hallway that you can get it anyways. They measured that, and they saw that the kids who didn't realize that there was a vending machine down the hall performed and outperformed and tried harder than the kids that knew that there was another option, that there was a plan B. And that seems so obvious, like, having, like, why bother do it if you could get it anyways if it was down the hall? But again, how is that drawn into your life? How is that taken into your life? Where in your life are you looking at something being like, it doesn't really matter if I try or fail, I can always do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't really matter if it doesn't work because I've got this. And that seems like, being proactive and thinking about, if all things fail, this is what I'm going to do. But I don't think that's helpful. I do not think that's helpful, especially when you're starting something new, because when shit hits the fan and things get difficult, and you're having the insecurity, doubt, and it's beginning to become a lot more harder than you actually initially expected, then you don't look to other things to jump to straight away, because there's nothing to jump to. So I think those are the main lessons that I've learned. I think a lot has happened in my life over the past few weeks, and 2025 so far has been fucking insane. Absolutely insane. And I think after the half Ironman, it's just about taking stock. I've mapped out my big goals that I want to achieve by the end of 2025. And the importance about when it comes to goals is what I've just literally just realized in the last week is how present they are, how obvious they are. So I got a whiteboard in work and it was too big, so I brought it home. I wrote six goals that I want to achieve by the end of 2025. And, people usually say, set smart goals, write them down. But it's just like, yeah, but that piece of paper is just tucked away in a folder and you never see it again. Or it's in your phone in your notes and you have to, go through your notes to find your goals that you set yourself. And go, oh yeah, I achieved that. But I put these on a whiteboard and every morning they're looking at me and every evening they're looking at me and they're judging me. And if at the end of 2025 they're not achieved, I'll be pissed off because they're there, because they're obvious, because they're clear. So now coming up to the 6-month mark, what are the initial goals that you set yourself in January? Have you achieved some of them? Are some of them something that weren't even specific? They weren't SMART goals, so they weren't specific, measurable, attainable. Not attainable, is it? Relevant and time bound. So what are those goals? And, are you far further or closer to them? And do you need to reset your goals? Do you need to set new goals like I've done? So now I've set my goals. 3 of them I know how to achieve. 3 of them are performance-based goals. And 3 of them, I just know the things that I need to do, follow the plan, follow the linear progression within them, be able to show up day in, day out, doing a specific thing, and I know I'll achieve them. Fuck. But the other 3, I don't know how to achieve. Like, it's not as clear. The inputs and outputs aren't that clear. There's a certain amount of investing time and energy in doing it and hoping that they'll come out the other side. But the reason that I just said fuck is because the other performance-based goals, if I wrote them up on the board without having previously achieved something similar to them, I wouldn't know how to achieve them. So one of the goals is PB my marathon. The other goal is stand on the podium in another Olympic triathlon. If I hadn't achieved something close to that before, if I hadn't ran a marathon, I hadn't done an Olympic triathlon and been on the podium, they would feel as intimidating as the other ones and I wouldn't know how to achieve them. I would have a rough idea of what to do on a daily basis in order to get closer to them, but I wouldn't know exactly that I would be able to achieve them. And that's funny because the other ones are professional based and to do with the run club. And because I haven't specifically done something similar like that before, then the inputs and how I get there are murky, they're unclear. So what I'm after just realizing is the reason that the other goals are clearer for me to achieve is because I've been there, done that. And if I be there and do that for the other goals, which is to do with the run club, which is doing with building the website and making more merch, if I go there and find out what it takes, then they will be clearer next time. Okay, so how do I reverse engineer that? The first time I did an Olympic distance triathlon, the first time I trained for a marathon, what did I do? I followed a structure. I did something every single day for a long period of time and trusted the process. So I have to do that for the other goals. So when it comes to building the website, I have to take the next steps necessary on a daily basis in order to get me closer. In order to, make the new merch, I have to take the steps necessary. I have to put in the time, doing the task, doing the process every single day or whatever for a long enough period of time, and I will be able to do it. Growing the Run Club to X amount of numbers and X amount of followers. Okay, I need to do consistently the behaviors on a daily basis for a long period of time, and I will get closer to that goal. So that's what I've just realized about the goals. But what I was trying to get to is telling people in terms of what I've learned of making the goals obvious, making them clear, making them in my house, making them visible to me at all moments in time, in which that I'm committing to this on paper. And here it is for people to see, for myself to see. And it's like looking in the mirror every morning, every evening, looking at myself and thinking, am I closer or am I further away? Have I done things? Have I not? And this will get me back and get me back and get me back. Okay, aligned. I'm clear. I know where I'm going. I know what to focus on. And are you actually living up to what you said you were going to do here? You said you wanted to achieve X, Y, and Z, but what are the behaviors? Are you doing the steps necessary in order to achieve it? So if you're listening to this and you've got some goals that you want to achieve by the end of 2025, write them down. Write them down on a piece of paper or get a whiteboard. It cost me 40 dirhams, which is like €10 on Amazon. Big whiteboard, big whiteboard. Write them down. Write 6. Write little notes for yourself as well. Write things that you can look to and just repeat to yourself as affirmations or quotes. Leave a note for yourself. Put it up somewhere. Put it up in somewhere that's going to be obvious. In your kitchen, in your living room, in your bedroom. Always look to it. And I promise you, you will start looking at your goals differently and you'll take the actions necessary on a daily basis. And they will be ever present in your mind, because I was always murky around goals and goal set. And it's something that I would do at the start of the year and forget about. But that's super important, and it's been a massive one for me. Yeah, there's so much more I could touch upon in terms of some of the recent updates and the way in which the things are going within the Run Club, like the people there. Like there's so much alignment within my life at the moment, and everything is happening in perfect synchronicity, and there's so many different things that are coming up that are making sense and slotting in at the right time. And my God, if a 10-year version of 10 years ago I was able to see my life today and what's happening, then I would be so impressed. And I would be so envious. Now, it's not easy to constantly remind myself of that. And at periods, I slip back into, you're not even near where you need to be. You're not becoming complacent. Why are you becoming complacent? You shouldn't stop moving. And you need to be constantly moving. So every now and again, I have to kind of bring myself back to where my feet are and bring myself back into the present moment and trust in that, just how I've trusted for things to come up in perfect time in the past, that it will continue to do that. In work-wise, professionally, a lot of positive things at Novi. A lot of great people have been brought in and are being continued to be brought in. I've been promoted to leasing director, which is a title, which means I'm not getting into it. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, this has been nearly 40 minutes of me chatting and giving a bit of an update. My pledge is going to be, continually making podcasts on not going to give it a time-bound basis of a commitment, but, regularly uploading. Maybe I should add that as another goal. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you're listening, you've never listened before, click the follow button. If you've never been to the Run Club, come down and rate and review the show if you haven't already. Appreciate it.